welcome back to my channel and welcome to the first monthly wrap-up video of the books that I read during February. I had a pretty good reading month actually, so I'm so excited to go through these. If you haven't seen my TBR prompt chooses, my book reads, I'll make sure to link those videos for you below. But I believe I read 4 books that were on my TBR for the month of February, so not too bad. There was a couple on here that I just happened to mood read, but for the most part, pretty good. I read a total of 6 books, so we have 5 physical books and then 1 I had on my Kindle and I actually listened to it just through audiobooks. First book that I read for the month of February was actually Ruthless Vows. This is the second and the final book in the Divine Rivals duology by Rebecca Ross. Highly anticipated read. I can't say too much about this book without giving away like the first one, just in case you haven't read it, but I did rate it. I gave this one 4 stars. I love the male and the female main character, so you've got Iris and Roman. I love them, like I love their dynamic, love their relationship. I also love like the other characters you're introduced to. My main thing with this book was there is this background of a war going on between 2 divine gods, and I just thought they could have done more of that storyline. But I still really did love it. I do recommend the duology series. I do think that I like Divine Rivals, the first book, more than Ruthless Vows, but I did gobble it up and I would read it again. So I do recommend that. So that is the first one, Ruthless Vows. Then I listened to an audiobook for my first book club. So let me just get it up on Goodreads. So I listened to The End We Start From by Megan Hunter. It is a post-climatic book. Very, very short. You can listen to it on Spotify Premium, and I believe it's only like maybe 150 pages long. But essentially you are following this main character and her baby throughout this story where there's been this mysterious environmental crisis that's happened in London. So she gives birth to a child. Very close after the birth, there's this big environmental crisis and they have to up and move. There's not a lot going on. It's definitely character driven. You don't really find out much about the climate crisis. Apparently they're making this into a movie as well. So if you are interested in watching the movie, then I do suggest you listen to it. I gave it 3 stars. I did find it interesting in terms of like you do get the perspective of the baby. So you just get these glimpses of him just having this normal quote unquote life where he's making friends, playing in these shelters. He knows no difference. So that was pretty cool, but really not much was going on and I probably wouldn't think about it again. But I am glad that I gave it a go. So that was the second one. And then we finally read The 7-Year Split by Ashley Poston. I actually gave this 5 stars. The fantasy element in here is not a 5-star thing for me. I just loved the dynamic of the characters and this book really got me thinking, which I liked. I thought about it a lot after, so that's why I gave it 5 stars. But you're following 2 main characters. So the character's great aunt passes away and she leaves her apartment to the main character, Clementine. There's only 2 rules with this apartment. The first one is that you have to take your shoes off before you enter, and the second is that you should never fall in love in this apartment. That is because you could enter your apartment one day and you go 7 years into the past. So you're following Clementine and one day she walks into her kitchen and there's a strange man there, and then they develop this little relationship, and then it's this almost like right person, wrong time is the whole concept, but they do eventually get together in the end as a romance would go. I really loved the concept of this book. I thought it was going to be very confusing and maybe not for me, but it does deal with some deep topics. I love a romantic story where the characters have like emotional depth. So that was a real big plus for me. It really got me thinking. It touched on a few topics that are quite sensitive. It turns out like the author at the end shares that she lost her grandfather to the same thing that she wrote that the great aunt lost her life to. Yeah, it was a really, really beautiful book. It really made you think about your own life and your own perspective. At the very end of this, there's also like a reading guide and there's also questions. So if you do have a book club, I do think that this is a great book for book club because it's got like discussion questions. For example, grief is difficult to manage, but especially sudden and traumatic. How does Clementine cope with hers has a Awan, who is the male main character. And then it's also got questions just to like get you thinking as well. So I really love this and I do recommend picking it up. So this is The 7 Year Split by Ashley Poston, and I really want to read The Dead Poet Romantics, or The Dead Romantic Poets, something like that, that is by the same character. So that was what I read next. Then we finally started the Chestnut Spring series. So the first book in the Chestnut Spring series is Flawless. This series is by Elsie Silver. I believe there's 5 books. Yeah, 5 books. It is a small town romance. This one you have close proximity. You have a bit of Grumpy Sunshine in there as well. But you are following a bull rider. There's like this little PR stunt where he gets caught saying something that the sponsors don't like. So he gets a bit of negative media attention. So then his agent assigns his own daughter, who works at the firm as well, to essentially go and babysit him, like manage his PR, make his image be rebuilt so that he comes across positive. And obviously close proximity. There's a little bit of an age gap, but it's not too big. And you just follow. They have like this great banter in this story. And the way there's like the tension building, the actual female main character, it was her childhood crush as well, the guy. It follows bull riding as well, so I get a little bit of interest in that and how the game works. It was a beautiful story. The male main character's family is awesome. Like, I love them all. And then I believe the next book we follow the older brother, so I'm excited to get his point of view too. There is depth to it as well. Like, your female main character, who's called Summer, her sister is called Winter, and there's like rivalry there. Get attached to the characters, so I really liked it, and I'm excited to pick up the next one. I actually have Heartless on my TBR for March, so I'm excited to continue this series. Quite low stakes read, very easy to power through, and a great palate cleanser after fantasy read as well. So I gave this one 4 stars. And then comes the 2 final books, and they are my favorite reads of February for sure. And I can't believe I'm saying this because I had read Magnolia Parks maybe back in October, November, and I didn't like it. Like, I actually really disliked it. I think I gave it 2.5 stars, and I was being fairly lenient. It was just too toxic for me, too repetitive. I got annoyed at the characters. There wasn't enough character growth in that first book for me to get attached and actually feel bad or good for the characters at all. But I ended up buying Daisy Hates because so many people love the Magnolia Parks world, and I just wanted to see if I could understand why. You have the Magnolia Parks perspective, which is the 1st, 3rd, and 5th book, and then you have the Daisy Hates books, which are book 2, 4, and then there is going to be a 6th book, but it's not released yet. So I was like, I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to pick up Daisy Hates, and I'm going to see if I prefer her perspective, and I do. I loved this book. This was on my TBR for February, and the prompt was actually a book that you've been putting off, and I was really putting this off because I didn't like Magnolia Parks. It put me into a bit of a slump, and I was really worried that this would do the same thing, but I loved it. I haven't actually stopped reading the Magnolia Parks universe since I read this book. You follow Daisy Hates, obviously, and you follow Christian, which is the love interest in this book. You are introduced to Daisy in the first book very briefly, and you get a very negative introduction to her. She's always standoffish. She comes across like a mean girl, but you don't know why. Like, no one kind of understands why. But then you read this book and you really understand Daisy herself. So she is the sister of a gang lord in London. So her life is obviously quite different to the average person's life. It is something that she was born into, something that she doesn't particularly want to be involved in either. And there are lots of things that we can't relate to. Like, it's very unrealistic, the things that she has gone through in terms of my personal life, most people's personal life, unless you're in the mafia or something like that. But I loved it. There's like found family in here. This is also set at the same timeline that the first Magnolia Parks book is set at, and that's how they go. So you read Magnolia Parks and then the next one will be Daisy Parks, but they're actually happening parallel to one another. And that gave me a better appreciation for the first Magnolia Parks book as well. So I want to go back and read the first Magnolia Parks now that I know everything that's going on, because I actually think that I could potentially like it now. But if you too have read the first book and you didn't like it, I suggest picking up Daisy Hates and giving it a go. See if you like it, because I love it and I am obsessed with these characters, and this was a 5-star read if it's not obvious. Because of this book too, I was supposed to read another one that was on my prompt jar, but I was obsessed with Daisy Hates, so I had to pick up the next Magnolia Parks book. So these are by Jessa Hastings. So this is Magnolia Parks, The Long Way Home. And obviously you're following Magnolia Parks' perspective and BJ's perspective, which is the love interest in Magnolia Parks one. I can't explain too much about this one because I don't want to give away the first book, but essentially it picks up where the first book ends. And I got a lot more character depth and development in here. They are still frustrating characters. Like, you're still going to be annoyed at the characters. It's still toxic. It doesn't take away any of that. You just get a better understanding of who they are underneath all the toxicity. And I appreciated that, and I felt a lot more invested in the characters. And I end up liking them. Like, I want to be friends with Magnolia and Daisy now. When I first read Magnolia Parks, not at all. Like, just so unrelatable, unattainable, like nothing. And I'm not saying that she's always likable. Like, these universe, the characters in here, they're not necessarily meant to be likable, but you learn to appreciate the flaws. They know they're flawed as well, that kind of helps, but I don't want to give you the wrong impression. It is still a toxic read, and they are in a toxic relationship, but I love it, and it's just like, it really pulls on your heartstrings. You just think something awesome's gonna happen, and then it tears you apart. And this book, like, the ending, oh, if you know, you know, like, the ending broke me. It, like, builds you so far up and then it breaks you. There's often a really good thing happening at the same time as a really bad thing happening in these books. And I like that because that's pretty realistic of life. So this was another 5-star read for me. It's a peek of what I've actually been reading at the start of March too, but I've actually already finished the second Daisy Hates book. I loved those books so much that I have these cover, and I've already decided that I had to pick up the nice indie cover. So this is the final Magnolia Parks book. Look at the difference in the cover. Of course I had to pick up the nice. But those are the 6 books that I read. We have these 5 and then the 1 audio book. So we have a 3-star, a few 4 stars, and 3 5-stars actually, because I did end up giving the 7-Year Split a 5-star rating as well. If I was to be like really critical, this one would be like a 4.5 compared to these, but they were all 5 stars and I loved them so much. I really liked filming this video. I need to get into the habit of filming the wrap-up. So I hope that you enjoyed it. Please let me know what you read in February, what your hopefuls are for March. If you've read any of these, what your thoughts are on Magnolia Parks universe. I'd love to know any of those things. But as always, please don't forget to comment, follow and like. Please do subscribe to my channel. It really means so much to me. My Instagram and my TikTok are at justbrooke.mcquaid. If there's any book content, any vlog content you want to see, comment it below and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!
Through the fields of